Hey guys, so today I'm going to talk all about Photoshop and what you need to know. At some point in your blogging career, you're going to be using Canva, which is a free platform to create images and graphics for your blog. But if you want to go next level up, and you don't need to, but once you get to the point where you need more flexibility in the types of images you're creating above what Canva can offer you, Photoshop is that great next step. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of Photoshop and the basics of what you need to know to truly step up and level up your Photoshop game and your blog game, okay? So let's get started, and if you want to see other videos from me, go ahead and subscribe and click on the bell icon for notifications for the next time I upload a video, okay? Stay tuned. How to use Photoshop. At this point, you should actually have Photoshop installed. I'm using a Mac. Windows may look a little bit different, but all in all, it is pretty much the same in terms of like the menu options. Your menus might look a little bit different, but they might be hidden in certain sections. So I'm going to give you an orientation of the Photoshop application, and then I'm going to walk you through some of the important things, because at the end of it, I want to be able to teach you how to edit your photos in terms of like the size, as well as different things you can do to make it like Pinterest ready or even Instagram ready. Okay, so first off, when you open Photoshop, you'll want to go to File, New, and this window will pop up, and it will have different pixels, sizes, and that basically tells you the length and width. Okay. So if you look at this, you can actually create your own as well. So these are the most common ones, but typically I would do like 600 by 900. So that's a width and that's a height, and do it in pixels. You never want to go above 1500, especially if you're like sharing on social media. So 1500 by 1500, that would be a square. And then 600 by 900 is typically the resolution needed for Pinterest. And typically for resolution, 300 is pretty high. I typically recommend 240, okay? So just save this, and you can actually save this as a preset if you wanted to, but ignore all that. All I want you to do is do a width and a height and a resolution, okay? So if you want a square, make it 1500 by 1500 or 1000 by 1000. It doesn't matter as long as it's under 1000 or 3000. And then right here, resolution should always be 240. If you go ahead and hit create, it'll give you a blank canvas. So at this point, what you could do is go ahead and start working on this blank canvas. But what I'm going to show you first is an overview of all the things that you have, okay? So the first part is this left navigation here. There's a bunch of different tools. If you highlight over it, it'll show you all these different things that you could do. And if you look at this little like mark icon, there's like this little arrow on the right corner. There's other tools underneath it. So if you right click there, you can see that there's a blur tool, sharpen tool, smudge tool. So like this one has a gradient tool, paint bucket, and you'll get to learn all the tools, I promise. But overall, left here is a toolbar, and then here is the layers panel. So all these panels that you see are movable. Yeah, it's crazy. So yours might not look exactly like that, but that's okay. If you take it out, and you see this blue line right here, and you take it back in, it will allow you to adjust where you want to work. And so for my view, this is how I want to work. So I've got the toolbar here, the layers, and the history panel. If you do not see these panels, they might be on this other side, or they might be at the top or the bottom. Under window, you can see all of the different windows. Like if I want the histogram, I can populate it. So if you don't see it, make sure that you click on window and add that little panel in there. And so here I've got the history, and this allows me to undo and do stuff. And for example, if I go ahead and put it in there, see how I hover over it? It'll overlay it. Or if I wanted to, I can go down here and add it here and adjust. Okay? It all depends on how you work. Here I've got like all these other like panels. For your sake, what you want to do is have layers, history, your toolbar on the left, and then you want this color swatch or swatches. Okay, you want swatches in here so you can change colors if you need to, as well as character. So swatches and character. Pause this video so that you can at least get those things in place. So you got your toolbar, your layers, your history, and your swatches. So now, once you have that set up, what I'm going to teach you how to do is pull in like images, because at the end of the day, imagery is important for social media. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up all of my files here real quick in a different window. 1 second. All right, so I have on a different screen, basically I'm just dragging photos, okay? So what I'm going to do is I've got this bedroom photo. I'm just going to drag it in here. Literally all I'm doing is dragging, okay? So I'm dragging it, and then I can hit that little check mark at the top. Do you see that? All of these things, you'll see a little check mark at the top, and if you don't click it, it will not allow you to do anything else. So I went ahead and checked it, and we're good. So I like how that's placed. If I wanted to make it bigger to fill, what I can do is just hit Control-T for transform. Control-T. Okay, and you'll get these little icons in here. If you don't know what that means, if you do Edit and hit Transform, and you can scale the photo, okay? But all I do is do Control-T, and it allows me to have these little anchor points to resize. And so I can resize it just like that, okay? And it'll keep the proportions. So if I wanted to fill this screen, I can completely do that. Control-T is gonna be your best friend, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and make it a little bit smaller because I want to make a collage. And so I can keep pulling images in there. You see how it has like layers in there? So on top of this white background, I've got this layer. If I uncheck this eyeball icon, I can see what's there and what's not, right? So I can go ahead and pull up, and I can call this bedroom. You're not modifying the photo, you're just modifying that layer in there, okay? And let's say I wanted to add, I don't know, another one called, let's see. Okay, I got this picture of my computer hands. I know they don't go well together, but here you are, okay? So I can go ahead and do I didn't have to do Control-T because when you pull it in, it automatically asks you but it tells you that you can transform it. So I'm going to go ahead, and I like that view. I'll go ahead, hit that little check mark. And now I've got this view. So now you have computer hands. Okay, so I'm renaming it because these are layers. So think of them as blankets. So you had, first off, you had sheets. And now you've got a top sheet, a flat sheet. And now you've got a comforter, right? So you're layering them on top of each other. And so let's say I wanted to fade this photo a little bit. So what I can do is underneath the bedroom, I can change the opacity. You see this opacity? And if you look at the hand, you'll probably have to kind of go in and look at it. If you hover over opacity, you'll see this little scrubby bar. It's going to do the same thing as if you went down and clicked on this little arrow, but this changes the transparency. So look at the bedroom photo for a second, and when I drag it down, see how it like fades? Okay, so when you would use that fade is if you have like text. So here you can see like in this black outline, I've got a fade going on in here. So I can see my little kid's little legs right there. It's because there's an opacity change. So transparency, opacity, same thing. We call it opacity in here. So you can change the opacity of the images. And so that's really important for when like you're wanting like your social media image to have words stand out over the image and vice versa. So like here, I wanted to show like some transparency in the background, right? So that's what I did. So what I can also do is maybe create a box around that. So there is this little like icon that looks like an ellipsis, and there's a bunch of like shapes underneath it. So I could potentially do a ellipsis, a single row, or rectangular, and there's a bunch of different ones you can do. I typically stick with the rectangular marquee, and what I can do is pick on that. So all I did was right click and then left click on the rectangular marquee tool, and I'm just going to draw a box, right? And if you hit down, if you click on shift, it will create a square, okay? But I'm going to go ahead and just do a rectangular box. All right, so what I'm going to do first is create a new layer. See this little trash box icon? You're going to create a new layer right here, And then you're going to click on this paint bucket tool. And if you don't see the paint bucket tool, right click, okay, and do paint bucket. And then here I can determine what color I want it to be. And it might be helpful to have your swatches on this side. It depends on what you want to do. I use layers and history more so than swatches. But in this instance, let's say I wanted to do orange. Okay, I clicked on the paint bucket. You'll see this little eyedropper icon if you hover over swatches. Let's say I wanted it orange, right? So I click on orange. Just hit OK if that pops up. It's telling you want to name it. And you'll notice that this top layer and bottom layer, like you want the top layer to be orange because when I go ahead and click into my new layer that I created with this button, it creates that orange, right? But like that's kind of too much and too in your face. So what I can do for that specific layer, I can change the opacity down. Okay, so I like that. So to unselect this, what I can do is go to select, and when it says select on here, it's these little ant icons, marching ant icons. You want that to go away. So you can click on deselect or Control D, okay? Control D or hit select, deselect. All right, so now I've got this. Let's say I want to add words to it, okay? What I can do is go in and create a new layer, or I can just hit this T icon. T is not for transform here, it's for text, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and hit T, and then click on the top layer in T, okay? Notice how it creates a new layer right here. What I'm going to do is put in bedroom furniture. All right, you keep texting, and you probably don't like the format or the location of it. So I'm going to click on this little checkbox, okay? And then you see this little arrow icon on the left? That allows you to move the text back and forth. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that little icon and I'm going to move it just around, right? See how awesome that is? What I can do is click on that text icon again, make sure that this is highlighted, and I want to put this on the next line. I can do that. What if I don't like how it's like formatted here? I can highlight it and center it. So this like toolbar, I like to call it a secondary toolbar because this is your toolbar, like your bar of tools. But then this allows you to kind of like modify and change how it's functioning. So when I click on this, this will change. If I click on the bucket, this will change. This allows you to have different settings for whatever tool you're working on, okay? So I'm going to go click on this checkbox, and if I want to move it back over, again, it's this arrow icon, and then I just go ahead and click it and move it over. Well, let's say I don't like the font, right? Go ahead and click the T for text again, highlight it, and then I can search for whatever font color I want. See how I did that? Just hovered over and picked a red or a pink or a orange, whatever color I want. And I can also change the font. There's several ways to do everything in Photoshop. So you'll notice I have this character panel. I can change the font here. I can change the font here. There's so many places. So it really depends on what your workflow is and how you like to work. But again, several places to do it. I would look at here to see what options are available. And once you get comfortable with what options are there, you'll know whether or not you like to have the toolbar on top or on bottom. But there's what I've done so far. And I can use this little scrubby icon, this is the font size, to change the font size, okay? All right, so let's say I want to change this back to black, highlight it. What do? I go and and this is like black and white. And what this is, this little small black and white, it's always the default there. So if you have like crazy colors here, you can just switch it back and forth. And then it'll default back to black and white, okay? So there's that. Let's say I wanted to add a border around this orange color, right? What I can do is highlight this layer that has the orange in it. If I do Control, and then you see how that little icon shows up with the square and the dots. If I go ahead and click on Control and click on that image, it automatically selects that box for me, okay? What I can do is do Edit and Stroke. A stroke is basically a border. And so I typically do a border of 3 pixels. You can play around with what you want your image to look like, 1 to 2 to 3. Typically, if you have a 1500 pixel image, you probably want like a 3 to 4. I know the style right now is like thin lines around, not thick ones. So I typically do 3 pixels or less. So 3px per pixel. And now, again, select, deselect, or Control D. You'll see that I've got a border, okay? And it's kind of transparent because it's on this layer. Now, if I do Control Z, or I can do, actually here's the history panel. If I undo it, I go back 1 step, I now do not have a border. So this is like an undo history panel, which is great. But if I wanted to create a new layer and add that border, I can. So I'm going to go ahead, because maybe I don't want that to be a transparent layer, like the border. I want it to actually be a border and not be transparent. So what I can do is still Control and click on that orange layer, but make sure that I'm on this this gray layer when I create the stroke. So Edit, Stroke, 3 pixels. Okay. So now I've got that view. That's great. If I wanted to add another font, just click on the T and say www.sangerson.com. I can highlight it. I can change the font to a different font. And typically what you want to do for fonts is if you have a serif font, you want a sans serif font to kind of complement it. Sans serif versus serif is, this is a sans means without little curl. Okay, so I probably want a curl for this font. So typically you want 3 or less font per image. So I'm going to do that and hit OK. And then I can click on this little move tool. You can also use V and just move this where I want it to. Okay. That is really Photoshop in a nutshell. I will go through a few other little tips and tricks, but what I want you to do is play around with like kind of creating these boxes, transparency. The other thing I'm going to show you is if you want to crop. There's 2 ways to crop, okay? First is if you know that you want a section to crop, you can click on this little ellipsis tool again and highlight the section you want to crop and click on Image, Crop. It'll crop your image, okay? But it saves this stuff in here. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to undo that. There's also this crop tool itself. It doesn't matter what you use, at least I don't think, because I use either depending on what I want to do. But the crop will allow you to kind of use what they recommend for cropping. But it doesn't matter how you do it as long as you know that you want to cut the image down to size. Now, one thing I will say is on the left, at the very bottom, you'll see like this little box that you can click. This will tell you the height, the width, and the resolution. Ignore the channel for now, but width and the height and the resolution of the image. And so if you're wanting to see, hey, is this going to fit for a certain social media channel, you can click on this and see. If you go on Google, and I always Google this, I know 600, 900 is Pinterest, but best image size for Facebook cover, or whatever it is that you're trying to figure out to size, they'll be able to give you the recommendation. So 820 pixels wide by 312 pixels tall, right? So if you're creating a Facebook cover photo, what you'd probably want to do is go to File, New, and it says 820 by 312, and 240, remember, was the recommended resolution for all images. Hit Create, and then it'll create like a canvas for you for that size, and you can see down here below, that's the size, okay? So that is how I create images for social media. And for every blog post, what I typically do is create a Pinterest image, a Facebook image, and an Instagram image for every single post, so that I can share it, okay? And then Twitter, I typically use either or. It doesn't really matter. But typically I will create 3 media social channels or 3 images specific to Pinterest, Facebook, and Instagram. Okay, so you're probably wondering, how do you save these images once you're done modifying them? They will actually save as Photoshop PSD files. And what's great is that you can actually, if you save it, it'll save the layers. But the images that you want to export need to be JPEGs. Those are the ones that you will load onto Facebook, onto Instagram, onto Pinterest. So I'm going to show you that. So first, if you want to export the image, File, Export, Save for a web as legacy. I know it sounds crazy. Save for web. And then you can actually save it as a JPEG here, okay? JPEG, and it tells you like how big that file is going to be. So you want it to be high, and then quality, I typically bump it up to like 100. And then in the left here, I can see how big that file is going to be. You do not want anything over 1 megabyte. You want to typically stay under 500K. So this sounds like a really good number right here, 301. So it'll take 55 seconds to load. If someone has speed dial, or what do you call it, just dial up. Okay, so that gives you an idea of how long it takes. And so someone has like internet speed, like you can see how long it takes for them to download. So overall, you want this to be under 500K and JPEG and maximum if possible. If this number is too high, start bumping down the quality a little bit, okay, by like 5 each time until you get to the number of 500 or less. So you can click on Save and then save it to wherever file you want to save it. And then that's it. That is it. Now you should have a file for Pinterest, Instagram, and I would recommend saving it with this SEO terms that you're beginning to learn about, and then saving it with like the social media handle behind it. Like, so if it's like a bedroom furniture, it would be like bedroom furniture, Pinterest, bedroom furniture, Instagram. The other thing I would recommend is saving this actual like collage. I call it collage. It's a Photoshop file. Because what's really cool is you can actually pull the file. Like, let's say this is your template and you like the font that you're using here. What you can do is actually pull it to another image. So for example, if I wanted to pull this over here and I didn't necessarily want, like, let's see, I can hide these. I didn't want these images. What I can do is, let's say I have this file open right here. I can go click on this and do Shift and click on the last one, so it'll pick all 4 of these, and then just move them. See how like once I hit Shift, it goes directly to this move tool. I can drag these files and then drop them to this file, and then I can do Control T for, again, changing the image size and moving it down. So that way you're not having to spend time recreating all the media things that you just did, right? You can just tweak it and put whatever else you want on there. So if you created a template, save this as a template. And I would also save the versions, because sometimes like I will mess up on like these words and I didn't realize it until I start posting. And then I have to go redo all this stuff again. So I would just save the PSD file. And when I say save as PS, if you click on File, Save As, you're not going to export, you're just doing File, Save As. Just save it as a Photoshop image. So it'll say PSD file. And I would save it as, let's say, furniture, ideas, Pinterest, and just save it. And I have a collage folder with all of my collages in there. Even though I've got like specific folders for every blog post, I still have a collage folder with all my collages, because I can look at like that collage folder and say, hey, this makes sense for this type of post, and then I'll pull it in. But typically for any type of blog or course, you want consistent branding across the board. So if you create 5 templates that you kind of like, make sure you keep to that 5. Don't create new ones like randomly with random colors. Make sure it's consistent either with like stylistically with the font, the colors for the background, and even the size of the font. Okay, I hope that helps. You've learned now the basics of Photoshop. There are a ton of other videos that you can learn, like fancy stuff like editing photos, making them brighter, but overall, this is how you use Photoshop in a nutshell. If you have questions, please feel free to ask in the Facebook group, okay?